Emil Gallagher. This is our micro talk show. Emil Amok's Takeout, my takes on all things considerable. Thank you for being here. If you're here early, you're here for what I call the preamble. This is kind of like the warm up, the lagniappe, the something extra. We usually come on around 2-ish, 2 o'clock Pacific time, live. Lots going on today, lots going on over the weekend. And I did something that I rarely do on a Sunday. I did not see any football on because I was emceeing the American Book Awards, and it wasn't on C-SPAN. It was recorded, and they say it's going to be on C-SPAN at some point. But it was a good event, and I'm going to talk about it because something happened in terms of the Asian American literary scene that is historic. And the key word is what the key word is what Maxine Kingston used is rapprochement. And I better change the font or the caption here. Yeah, I'll change the caption here. I'll because this is show 581, and we're talking about the American Book Awards. See, I got to do this on the fly because I don't have interns or anything. American Book Awards, rapprochement. That's the key word. And Maxine Kingston, who you might know as the woman warrior, but she is really the godmother of Asian American literature. And I'll explain in a second. Also, it is Filipino American History Month. If you felt something different, Filipino American History Month. Not necessarily Filipino American or not necessarily Filipino history, but Filipino American History Month. And let's see if it now I get the new thing here. It makes a difference, right? It's because what happens in the Philippines determines what happens to Filipino Americans here. And they're kind of intertwined, but if you listen to my past shows in October, we still have some things to go over, some factual stuff in terms of what's Filipino American history, what's Filipino history. But post World War II and then later post 1965, when the Immigration Act changed, it's totally different, right? I mean, it's still in flux, and that's why it's going to be exciting when we have a Filipino American History 101 this weekend, October 7th and 8th, sponsored by the Filipino American National Historical Society. They're the ones behind Filipino American History Month. Just go to FANHS.org and register. There's about several hundred people. It's going to be a webinar, a national webinar, and I'm hosting the second day, Sunday, so I'm going to miss more football, but for a good reason. It's 4 to 6 p.m. Pacific. I'm hosting Sunday, and then Saturday is hosted by the President Emeritus of the Filipino American National Historical Society and co-founder, Dorothy Cordova. And that should be interesting because she covers everything leading up to World War II. So we're including 1587. We're including the Spanish galleon trade. We're including when the first Filipinos arrived. We're including the Manong generation and their kids. So that means the 1920s and 30s and 40s. And then, and she even says that's the easy part, talking about that part, because that's kind of settled. It's just that most people don't know about it. So talking about it is a matter of exposing people to their history, to American history, not just Filipino history, American history. And then, of course, then comes World War II and comes post 65 with the Immigration Act changing the makeup of American society. And then you have the Marcoses, and that's the area that I'm going to be talking about. Go to FANHS, FANHS, Filipino American National Historical Society, response.org and sign up. It's free. Filipino American History 101 this coming Saturday and Sunday. All right, so I am going to talk about the American Book Awards, but I also want to talk about something else in connection with Filipino American History Month. As you know, I've been talking a lot about this on the Aldef blog, and that is the movie 1521. Here's a guy who had a dream about telling his Filipino American story. I'm talking about Francis Lara Ho. He originally was in California, then moved to Florida, got the financing behind this movie, got a big star, Danny Trejo, who, when you see him, you'll know him. You know, he's usually seen as the badass Mexican guy in movies. He plays Magellan. And the story, 1521, is about how the Filipinos put Magellan in his place. They killed Magellan. This is the movie about, really about standing up to colonialism, standing up to imperialism. And it's significant because producer Laura Ho, or Francis Lara Ho, has got to deal with Fathom Events. If you go to Fathom Events tonight at 7 p.m. across the country, you still have time in the East Coast because it's only like 5 o'clock there now, and a lot of time on the West Coast. If you go to fathomevents.com and look for 1521, The Quest for Love and Freedom, you can get your ticket. And the tickets are for AMC theaters around the country. And if you buy a ticket, it's like a show of support for these kind of stories, specifically Filipino American, Filipino stories. Actually, this really encompasses all of people of color who have been subjugated. And this is a film about, I mean, we know the history. Lapu-Lapu killed Magellan. It didn't stop imperialism of the Spanish, of the Philippines. But the fact remains, Lapu-Lapu, a Filipino leader, killed Magellan. And so if you ever wanted to kill the imperializer, if you wanted to kill the colonizer, this is your opportunity today, October 2nd, at any AMC theater in the country. I believe if you know, one of the 8 plexes or 16 plexes, one of the screens will have this movie, 1521. It's a Fathom event. And you know, Fathom events, they're good for things like, I think they did Allegiance, right? The George Takei musical. So Fathom events, go to Fathom, FATHOM events.com /events/1521, The Quest for Love and Freedom. FathomEvents.com. Today only, 7 o'clock around the country, no matter where, 7 o'clock local time. If you're on the East Coast, and then all across the country, 7 o'clock Central Time, 7 o'clock Mountain, 7 o'clock Pacific, 7 o'clock Hawaii time. You'll be able, if you have an AMC theater that works with Fathom Events, you'll be able to see 1521. It stars Danny Trejo as Magellan. If you know Danny Trejo, if you watched any films, he's the badass Mexican guy, right? He plays that character, and he plays Magellan, and he gets killed. You gotta love that. You gotta love a film where the colonizer gets slayed. This is your chance. So go to fathomevents.com, 1521. And I talked to Francis, the producer, Francis Lara Ho, and he said that if he gets a good showing, he'll take the data of the audience that showed up on October 2nd, the start of Filipino American History Month. They'll take it to the studios, he'll take it to all the streamers, and he'll try to get this film more widely distributed on a number of platforms around the country. or worldwide, really, right? Netflix is international, but that's the hope. So do your part on Filipino American History Month, October 2nd, as we begin. Get a ticket to the Fathom event, the screening of 1521, 7 p.m. all throughout the nation. I talked to one friend of mine. She's in New York, and she's going to go to. I think they've got an AMC on 42nd Street. She's going to go to that. AMC's. I'm going to an AMC here in California at 7 o'clock my time, just to show support. That, I mean, this is sort of like going to see a movie on opening night, right? You want to see opening weekend so that it gets big box office. They couldn't get distribution to get an opening weekend. So this kind of substitutes for that. And this is what it takes to get Filipino American stories or Filipino stories, or to get the kind of inclusion we want in the cinema. Now, whether or not it's a good movie, remains to be seen. I've seen the trailer. It looks good. It's a real Hollywood production. It didn't cost what Barbie cost, right? Barbie, which cost, I forget, I used to have that number on the tip of my tongue, especially when Barbie was just opening. But this is a real deal Hollywood movie, right? And you figure if just a handful of the 4 million Filipinos show up, 4 million Filipinos in the United States, that could be 400,000. If you went to Netflix and said, hey, 400,000 people would come to see this film called 1521 about the slaying of Magellan, they'd be a lot more interested in Filipino stories, right? I mean, we've had some washouts over the last, say, 6 months or so, 6 to 8 months. I mean, there was a movie that was heavily backed by Steven Spielberg. Didn't happen. Opened up. Didn't happen. I don't know. I don't know why. I mean, it's a fickle audience out there, right? So go to Fathom Events and check out 1521. All right, I've talked enough about 1520. Because this is it. Today's the day. Filipino American History Month start October 2nd, Monday. Go see it. AMC Theaters. Pick up your tickets at fathomevents.com and show your support for 1521, the year that Magellan was killed by Lapu-Lapu. And then how many people know that? How many people? You got to tell it in a cinematic love story so people know, hey, we tried back in 1521 to kill the colonizer. We tried. All right. Over the weekend, I was the MC of a program at the San Francisco Public Library at the Corrett Auditorium, the American Book Awards, which it was a great event. I mean, there were some good books that I was exposed to. No Filipino American stories. And, when you MC an event, it's like you're just you're the master of ceremonies. You're just trying to move the show along. And you're not the star, though. You're only the master, so you're not the star. It's not like the Oscars where I get to do a Billy Crystal monologue, or I get to be punched by some actor or anything like that. I'm really there kind of like in a Dick Clark or Ryan Seacrest kind of role, right? Ryan Seacrest doesn't sing as well as the American Idols that he presents, but there he is. He tries to make everyone look good. And Dick Clark, same thing. This is the role of the DJ. Here are the records. Here are the artists. Here's the thing. And I guess if I blended in and was not too obnoxious, then that was good. And I don't think I was very obnoxious, because I left thinking, oh, I didn't do as well because did I get out it's not my points. It's like all the other people's points, and just moving the show. Anyway, I thought it was a good show, but everyone, of course, was there for one thing. And not just to be exposed to all the books. The book that really stood out for me was a book written by a Coptic uh, practitioner here in America who's also a physician, a Coptic physician who wrote about a book called Mummy Eaters, which is a tremendous metaphor. And I can't wait to get my hands on the book, but it won an American Book. I mean, the whole idea behind the American Book Awards is that it is intended to be a showcase for voices that are otherwise marginalized and otherwise not heard. And I was pleased that I was part of this because I was an MC, but also because I was a past winner. Because as a past winner, I won an American Book Award in 2000, which means, and it's for a compilation of my columns that appeared in the ethnic media, which is where you'd hear voices on the margins, voices on the fringe that aren't necessarily white, that aren't necessarily mainstream. And the compilation of my essays called Amok, Essays from an Asian American Perspective, won an American Book Award in 2000. And I just am pleased that I'm a practitioner as well as the MC guy, because it meant that I had a place at the table, right? Because Asian Week Books, Asian Week Press, first by publishing my columns in Asian Week and then putting it together in a book, it fulfilled the promise. Here's our voices. And the fact is, the book, even though it's journalism, has a much more important role, because not only is it the first draft of history, but at some point it becomes history when people say, where are the documents that show what Asian Americans thought or what Asian Americans were thinking back then? And in the absence of Asian American voices in the mainstream, when they see a book, when they see columns and they say, oh, that's what they were doing, that's very gratifying, because it becomes more than just journalism. It becomes a part of history and maybe the good words. I mean, I did a calculation. Between 2010 and now, 13 years, I must have written close to 500,000 words, which might explain why these shows tend to go long. 500,000. And then when you go back to the beginning of the column in 1995, my Emil Amok column, well, that's almost close to 1 million words. And not all of them are award winning. I know that. But they're there and they're available to people. And I'm a giver. They're out there. You can see the opinions and see how I mix history with my opinion. And so I was just very gratified that I could be the MC, but also a writer, because that's sort of the upshot. The upshot is they were reading off my bio as they introduced me, but I'm just a writer of Asian American, Filipino American stories. And that's what the American Book Awards honor. Now, one of the things about the American Book Awards is, they happen every year. I won in 2000, but 44 years. That's how many American Book Awards there were. And this was significant. This was significant because, as I said, they honored Maxine Kingston. And I got her book, and I got up to her and I thanked her, number one, for blurbing my book 23 years ago. I mean, she said something like, oh, in Asian Week, Emil's column is the first thing I turn to. He's a lot of fun. He's got new perspectives. Boy, it was just a reminder when a writer like Maxine Kingston says that about your work. Honor your work. It means something when someone like Maxine Kingston read you. So I was there to honor her words and her work. And I also, when you say Maxine Hong Kingston, most people just automatically go with The Woman Warrior, because that was the book in the 70s that opened it up, that made sure people knew that Asian Americans had a literary voice. I mean, beforehand, there were some voices out there, but no one on a mass scale that the New York publishing industry really recognized as, oh, that's a mainstream voice. Maxine Hong Kingston, she was the first. And then she followed up with Chinamen, story about her father. Her story is pretty interesting. Her father actually came through Cuba and then was in New York and went from New York to Stockton, California. Now, I would have thought, just thinking that he had an ordinary kind of, emergence into American life through, the boats that took him to San Francisco or LA or, someplace off the Pacific. But no. Maxine Hong Kingston's father came up through Cuba to New York and then went to Stockton, and then found herself growing up among a variety of Asian American, families there. And one of the first things she told me when I saw her yesterday, she said, Emil, a lot of my family is part Filipino. She said, and I love Maxine. And I always loved The Woman Warrior. But one thing I was not familiar with, the disagreement that occurred between the other Asian American literary group at the time, which was led by men, mostly Asian American men. I'm talking about Sean Wong. I'm talking about Frank Chin. I'm talking about the guys who put together the IE anthology. And the people who remember the 70s, IE, A-I-E-E-E-E, that was the breakthrough, the literary breakthrough for Asian Americans who wondered, where were the Asian American voices in our English classes? Where were the Asian American voices in, American, literature? I mean, they were there. They had smaller audiences, and none of them broke through, but there was Frank Chin, and there was Sean Wong, and there was Oscar Penaranda. I forget the others who were included in that anthology, but it was a breakthrough anthology. And I remember when I came up with the idea of going amok, I thought of IE. How is it that I, as a journalist, as an essay writer, as a columnist, could capture how we felt in our silence, but that we were so full of silence that we had to go amok. I mean, that was the idea when I came up with the idea of amok for my column in 1995, when I published my first amok column. It was inspired by the IE guys. But in fact, I never saw the issue that developed between the IE guys and Maxine Hong Kingston. There was a major disagreement about what was an Asian American or what was a Chinese American story. Who had the right to, I don't know what it was. Was it jealousy? Was it just a kind of, was it misogyny? Because Maxine broke through. And I remember when I first was exposed to Women Warrior, I did not see it as this schism between male, female, Asian Americans. But apparently there was a schism between Asian American writers. Because when Maxine Hong Kingston took the stage and won the Lifetime Achievement Award at the American Book Awards, she said that the award meant a lot to her because the award was presented to her by Sean Wong. And let me just say, I will read some of what Sean Wong says. It was Sean Wong couldn't be there because he was ill up in Seattle, but he talks about teaching Tripmaster Monkey, and he talks about why he teaches that because it explains that there was this schism in Asian American literary circles. And he said in his statement, he says, even when Tripmaster Monkey came out in 1989, it was still possible to read every Asian American book in print in America, and it would have taken just a few weeks to do so. And that Kingston's main character, and Sean Wong says, and if you know Asian American literature and its writers, you're able to read Tripmaster Monkey and recognize who many of the people were in the story, or know the origin of some of their stories. So he teaches it because it is about Asian American literature. And then he thanks Kingston. He quotes another author who calls Kingston the godmother of Asian American literature. And he says, that's true. It's so true. I don't know if there's anyone. I saw male Asian Americans who were winners of the American Book Award go up to Maxine Hong Kingston after she won the award to hug her and thank her for her inspiration. And so Sean Wong said the final word of his statement. He says, this Before Columbus Foundation, they're the founders of the American Book Award. This Before Columbus Foundation is here to not just celebrate a writer and her books, but a member of the family who tells our story, and we can say, there I am in this book. And for how many Asian American writers is that true? I would say 100%. If you grew up with Maxine, or if you recall the time when she published in the 70s, Woman Warrior, and then later Tripmaster Monkey, that's what you can say about Maxine. You could look at her stories, you could look at her books and say, there I am. There I am in her book, in this book, rather. So Sean Wong in his statement says, thank you, Maxine, for giving us a seat at the table of American literature. Sean Wong. Now, with that presentation, I'd expect a thank you. I'd expect something like that. But we got more than that, because Maxine Hong Kingston knew the significance of this statement coming from Sean Wong, an Asian American writer who was part of the whole, IE, phenomenon when it first came out, the literary anthology, and is a member of the Before Columbus board. And here's what Maxine said as she accepted the Lifetime Achievement Award after the introduction by Sean Wong.
This means that there is some rapprochement coming among writers who were arguing who do those stories belong to and who is authentic. In other words, who is true, and on this level, who is a Chinese and who is Chinese American.
I mean, think about that. It's still an issue. And before that moment, I wasn't really aware of the disagreement, but it was real. And later I talked to other writers and other members of the Before Columbus Foundation that, oh yeah, it was very real. And Maxine wasn't mincing words. She says, this means that there is some rapprochement. That is her word. And what does rapprochement really mean, except now there are kind feelings. Now we can have exchanges. Now we can have we can have this acknowledgement that we are one, right? He says, a rapprochement on being among writers who are arguing who do these stories belong to and who is authentic. What is an authentic Asian American? What is an authentic Chinese, right? In other words, who is true, and on this level, who is Chinese, who is Chinese American? That's what Maxine said. And, you know, we're still having these arguments today, are still having these questions. Here's more Maxine.
So for Sean and I, we were on opposite sides of
She says, Sean and I were on opposite sides of this argument. She acknowledges that.
this argument. And so his words today means that there is rapprochement, if not reconciliation.
And there's the applause. There's the applause. Rapprochement. I mean, you think we're talking about some kind of diplomatic thing. We're talking about a literary fight. And this, I mean, it would have been great if Sean Wong were there. But he sent his introduction to Maxine Hong Kingston via email, and Emissary was there to read it. And I think Maxine knew it was going to happen, but I don't know if anyone else did. And now we know. I mean, and it's significant because we still have this question. Because what we realize is that being Asian American isn't just a matter of our ethnicity. It's also a function of our time, our age. It's also a function of when we got here and what we experienced, because our experiences are the same, but they're also different. And so who's authentic? Who's got the authentic story? Who can tell the real Chinese story, the real Chinese American story? Or take that to all various Asian groups, the real Filipino American story, the real Filipino story, the real Vietnamese story, the real. We can argue, and writers have argued, but we're all coming out of the same pot where we come to this country as different, as othered, and we fight and we struggle, and sometimes we win and sometimes we lose, and these are our stories. This is the universal Asian American story. To argue what is authentic, what is real, who has the right, who owns these stories. If you can tell them, you own it. If you could tell the story, you own the story, if they're your story. And everything else is debate. Not necessarily argument, but I guess the argument got rancorous. And now we have, in the words of Maxine Hong Kingston, rapprochement and reconciliation, where we come together. Maxine Hong Kingston also told a story about how there is this kind of universality. I mean, she talked about going to a trip with other writers and seeing different symbols of our cultures, and in different images where in the lands that they were visiting, and seeing how things were similar. And you think something is so unique and it is your story, but it is all connected. It's all connected. We are one, fighting, struggling to be accepted, to have our stories heard. Anyway, Maxine Hong Kingston, the highlight at the American Book Awards. The highlight, of course, is just being exposed to all the books. Go to AmericanBookAwards.org and see the other winners. I'll post the other winners on my Aldef blog tomorrow. But the one book that really got me was Mummy Eaters. And maybe it's because I just visited the Sackler Gallery recently, and they're taking down the Sackler name from the gallery at the Met. Except they allowed the use of the name at one place because it was kind of the circumstances beyond the dig was not an appropriation, but it was kind of like some kind of a mutual dig or something. But this is a real thing. Mummy Eaters as a metaphor. I'm fascinated to read it. But there were other books too. Check it out on the American Book Awards website, americanbookawards.org. Anyway, that was a highlight for me. It was worth missing a day of football, being there, seeing Maxine Hong Kingston, and understanding why. And just over the last week or so, I've been exposed to more of her books. I mean, I actually read further into Tripmaster Monkey before. I mean, some people think, oh, you read Women in War, you think you got it. But you got to read Chinamen, and you got to read Tripmaster Monkey too. And you got to read her last memoir, I Love the Broad Margins of My Life. That is an interesting telling of where she is now. I mean, she's in her 70s now, and I suppose, and I'll talk about this in my column that I'm yet to write. I've yet to write about how I saw myself now compared to the writer I was writing my columns 13 years ago, 23 years ago, 28 years ago. Different experiences, different thoughts, different stages. And where Maxine Hong Kingston says she is now is she's not about recording the world or recording events. She's about being in the present and being in the present at all times with a sense of love and wonder, but being in the present. And she says she'll live as long as she has something to say. And thank goodness she has something to say still. Anyway, Maxine Hong Kingston, American Book Awards. They were yesterday. I think the plan is they were recorded by the San Francisco Main Public Library, and they will, I think the tape is going to be played on C-SPAN at some point. So look for that. Maxine Hong Kingston, American Book Awards. Even though I don't think I did as good a job emceeing, I didn't get in the way. We got off on time, and people who won got their awards, and we honored the missing voices in American literature again, and that's important. All right. Now, I wanted to talk about a bit of news. This is going to be a subject of my column tomorrow on the ALDEF site, and that is the new appointee to Senator Feinstein's seat. I mean, Senator Feinstein just came back. Her body was just returned to California. She's going to lie in state in San Francisco City Hall starting, I believe, on Wednesday. It's a sad time. I have said how much, Feinstein kind of meant to me personally and professionally. She was just a figure that was always there. You just can't imagine her not being around. But now we have to. She's not around. And I think I expressed my feelings for her when during the debate of the last year has always been, she's too old, get her out of there. And I said she deserves to leave on her own accord. So if you go over my ALDEF columns, you know how I feel about Dianne Feinstein. But now Gavin Newsom, what has Gavin Newsom done? Gavin Newsom has appointed this a person who's bailed him out before. You need it's almost like an HR selection. Who do Gavin Newsom was in a corner. He had promised that he was going to select a black woman, and all the quote unquote qualified black women. Well, one, Karen Bass, is now mayor of LA. She doesn't want to be senator, maybe. She doesn't really. Barbara Lee was the other person mentioned. She wants to be senator and is running for senator. But other people want to be senator too, like Adam Schiff, Representative Adam Schiff, and Representative Katie Porter. So it was a three-person race, and Gavin Newsom didn't want to take sides. So he selected a fourth Democrat because, and this is totally cynical, this was in Gavin Newsom's best interest, not in California's best interest. And that's my problem with his appointment of LaFonza Butler. I mean, it's not a matter of she's the best person. She's qualified enough. She hasn't served as an elected. She's been an appointee. She's not going to be a caretaker, meaning she's there to be in the job and then leave. She's there to be senator. And Gavin Newsom has done the best thing for him and not necessarily the best thing for the United States, nor the best thing for California, nor the best thing for Asian Americans. They're the most populous Asian American community, right, in the nation, California. I mean, he could have picked an Asian American. I mean, because after whites and Latinos come Asian Americans, then blacks. But he promised that there'd be an African American senator. Well, has there been an Asian American? Oh, yes, there is. Mazie Hirono. Yeah, Tammy Duckworth. There are Asian American senators. But from California? So, Gavin Newsom sometimes tries too hard to get it right. It's like his hair. He tries too hard to get it right. And this is why, as much as you want to like Gavin Newsom, as much as you want to embrace Gavin Newsom is almost too cynical for his own good. And it takes a cynic to understand that. But that really is my take on Gavin Newsom and his choice of LaFonza Butler. I mean, she's a black lesbian unionist. You go fight me on that. And it's almost like, I dare you to fight me on this. She's Emily's list. She served on the Board of Regents. I don't know if she had any of UC, University of Cal. I don't know if she had any educational background, but she served as a regent. She's always been there to bail out Gavin Newsom, and she is, again, his whole card to bail him out of this, because if he had to make a choice, he would have gotten it from the Adam Schiff folks. He would have gotten it from the devotees of his mentor, Dianne Feinstein, his late mentor, who was a shifty or a shiffy. He would have gotten it from the Katie Porter devotees. But look, Barbara Lee's she's not she's not unpopular among progressives. In fact, she is probably the most experienced and most principled. If you're looking for a black woman to serve, she would have been it. But he didn't want to go that route because Gavin Newsom was looking out for himself. No two ways about that. I'll write more about it in my column tomorrow. But it was a shocker, but you knew it had to happen soon because there are too many votes. And I think the upshot, though, and this is why it's sad that Feinstein has passed. Name the two senators from California. No one knows them. I mean, I see the guy, but he's just not in the mix. He's just not a guy you recognize or it doesn't roll off the tip of your tongue because he doesn't. Most people want to stay out of the news. That's how they preserve their effectiveness, by being sort of under the radar. At least with Feinstein, and when Boxer was there, we knew. But you ask anyone on the street, who are the senators of California now? No one knows. But Gavin Newsom has given us LaFonza Butler, which is great because in a way, she is I dare you to challenge her, right? It was a safe pick. You got a black lesbian unionist. How do you challenge her? Even Barbara Lee had to say, yeah, she's known in California political circles, not as well known nationally, but she supports her. But Barbara Lee isn't giving up. Neither are all the other candidates. Now we've got a four-way race. Certainly it's going to be a runoff, and it's going to divide the Democratic Party even more because Gavin Newsom wasn't strong enough to pick the best person for the job. And really, to be loyal or to be consistent with his promise and to pick the best person for the job, there was no one else but Barbara Lee. It had to be Barbara Lee, but it wasn't. So blame Gavin Newsom. That's, and you might say, Emil, that's kind of a cynical view. Yeah, no. The cynical view is what Gavin Newsom did benefited himself more so than the people of California. It may have benefited the nation, you might say, oh, here's a black lesbian, in the Senate. That's a first, I think. I don't know. You got to go over all the other. But I think it's, if Gavin Newsom were true and had some kind of integrity, he would have chosen Barbara Lee. I don't think there's any way around that. All right, that's going to do it for my show today. I know I've written a million words since, as I mentioned, since 1995. I'm going to try to keep these shows under an hour. So you'll listen and you'll send them around. You'll tell friends to watch and listen. Once again, we talked about Maxine Kingston and about Sean Wong's introduction and how Maxine used the term rapprochement. Rapprochement, which just means good feelings. Now we're talking. Now we're family. Reconciliation is another term she used, and people applauded at the American Book Awards yesterday in San Francisco. So that's it for our show today. Thank you for listening. Listen to other shows on amok.com if you missed this one. This is show 581. Or go on YouTube, listen to show 581. We have the PETA podcast you can also listen to if you can't get enough Emil for real. Thank you for being here. We like to end with a little meditation. Maxine Kingston, she inspired a lot of meditation too. That whole idea about, in her acceptance speech, when she said, hey, we're all kind of one. The symbols, our cultures, we have a lot of the same similar things. We are one people here. And it would be so nice if we would act that way sometimes. So I always close with a little loving kindness. Always a little loving kindness. So as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Emil Guillermo here. Until next time. Don't forget 1521 today, October 2nd. At only time, fathomevents.com. Nearest AMC theater. You got to show some support for the Filipinos killing Magellan. I mean, the spirit of it. You got to back that. 1521, Fathom Events. Check it out. Today only, October 2nd, 7 p.m. all throughout the country. So 7 p.m. East, 7 p.m. Central, Mountain, Pacific, Hawaii. If you're near an AMC theater, go to fathomevents.com, get your tickets. Check it out. Danny Trejo stars as Magellan. Who gets it? I mean, this is not a spoiler. We're there because we honor Magellan getting it from Lapu. All right. Back again tomorrow. Check out amok.com for replays. Here's your Tagalog phrase for today. It's the same one as it is all the time. Mahal